Welcome. Board members have a fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interests of the association, and that responsibility extends to how hiring decisions are approached and how staff are treated after they are in place. While board involvement can add valuable perspective, it also introduces legal and operational risk if not handled within the proper boundaries. Employment decisions are governed by strict federal and Florida laws, and even well-intentioned questions, comments, or actions can expose the association to claims of discrimination, inconsistent treatment, or improper supervision. In addition, when boards move too far into day-to-day staff interaction, it can blur the critical line between governance and management, creating confusion, inefficiency, and increased liability. So please follow along as we discuss aligning governance, management, and fair hiring practices. A practical guide to board participation in hiring and staff oversight without crossing the line. We will cover the fundamentals of fair hiring practices, including what can and cannot be asked during interviews, how to evaluate candidates consistently, and where legal risks most often arise. Just as importantly, we will address ongoing staff oversight, including appropriate board interaction with on-site employees, and the importance of maintaining the proper relationship with management. By the end of this training, board members will have a clear understanding of their ideal role in the hiring and employee oversight process, the boundaries that must be respected, and the best practices that protect both the association and the individuals involved. The goal is simple: support better hiring decisions, reinforce a professional and respectful work environment, and reduce risk, while staying firmly aligned with the board's governance responsibilities. We have 3 key areas of discussion. First, compliant hiring. We want to ensure hiring practices are compliant with federal, state, and local employment laws. This includes laws enforced by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, often referred to as the EEOC. Second, consistent practice. We want to follow consistent interviewing and hiring practices. Consistency is one of the most important protections against discrimination claims. Third, clear oversight, the best process for addressing employee performance or job duties to reduce potential discrimination claims and other legal risks. Several major federal laws guide fair employment practices in the United States, and board members should understand both the protected classes and how these protections appear in everyday workplace situations. The first is Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Title VII prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. Title VII also protects individuals from discrimination based on sex, which now includes sexual orientation and gender identity under federal interpretation. The second major law is the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. The ADA protects qualified individuals with physical or mental disabilities and requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations when possible. Examples of disabilities may include mobility limitations, visual impairment, hearing impairment, chronic medical conditions, or mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, or ADHD. Next is the ADEA, or Age Discrimination in Employment Act. ADEA protects applicants and employees who are age 40 or older from discrimination in hiring, promotion, compensation, or termination. Examples of potential violations include asking candidates when they plan to retire, making comments about someone being overqualified because of age, or preferring younger candidates based on assumptions about technology skills or energy level. Finally, federal immigration law requires employers to verify employment eligibility through the Form I-9 process, but it also prohibits discrimination based on citizenship status or national origin. For example, employers may not refuse to hire someone simply because they are a lawful permanent resident rather than a U.S. citizen, unless citizenship is legally required for the role. In Florida, these protections are reinforced by the Florida Civil Rights Act, which mirrors many federal protections and allows complaints to be filed through the Florida Commission on Human Relations. Because both federal and Florida laws apply, employers must follow whichever law provides the greater protection for employees. Some common risk examples include rejecting a candidate because they may not fit the culture when the concern is actually racial bias, asking, "Where are you really from?" or rejecting someone because of an accent that does not affect job performance, refusing schedule flexibility for religious observances when accommodation is reasonable, Asking a female candidate about childcare plans or assuming a role is better suited for a man. Rejecting a qualified applicant because they disclose a medical condition that could be accommodated. Asking candidates when they plan to retire, or saying a role needs young energy or you are looking for new blood. Everyone has unconscious bias. Bias is a natural human tendency to favor certain characteristics, experiences, or similarities. The goal is not to eliminate bias entirely, but to recognize it and prevent it from influencing employment decisions. One common bias is favoring candidates who share similarities with us, such as background, education, or personality. Another is forming an early impression during an interview and then subconsciously looking for information that confirms that initial judgment. Board members should also avoid the halo effect, where one impressive trait, such as a prestigious employer, overshadows other relevant qualifications, or, in contrast, letting one negative detail dominate your overall evaluation. To reduce bias, focus on the full set of qualifications for the role. Take notes during interviews, evaluate candidates using the same criteria, and rely on structured interview questions. Using this approach protects both the candidate and the association. Consistency is your guardrail. It keeps every candidate evaluated the same way and prevents you from drifting into high-risk areas. When reviewing resumes or conducting interviews, the most important principle is to focus on job-related qualifications. This includes experience, skills, education, certifications, and the ability to perform essential job duties. Avoid making assumptions based on personal information such as a candidate's name, background, age, or gaps in employment history. Every candidate should be evaluated using the same basic criteria. Structured interviews, where all candidates are asked the same questions, significantly reduce the risk of discrimination claims and improve hiring decisions. Taking clear, objective notes during interviews is an important part of a fair and consistent hiring process. Notes should focus strictly on job-related factors, such as a candidate's experience, skills, responses to specific questions, and ability to perform the essential duties of the role. Avoid including any personal observations, assumptions, or comments that are not directly tied to the job. This includes references to appearance, age, background, communication style unrelated to job performance, or anything that could be interpreted as bias. A good rule of thumb is simple. If the note would not be appropriate to say out loud in a formal hiring decision, it should not be written down. It is equally important to understand that interview notes can become part of the official record and may be reviewed in the event of a complaint or legal claim. For that reason, notes should remain factual, consistent across all candidates, and free from subjective or potentially discriminatory language. Once the hiring decision has been finalized and in accordance with company policy, all informal interview notes should be properly destroyed. This helps ensure that only the appropriate official documentation is retained, reduces the risk of misinterpretation, and protects both the association and the individuals involved in the process. Never make promises to candidates or employees regarding job security, future promotions, compensation increases, or long-term employment. Even well-intentioned statements such as, "This is a stable position," "We're looking for someone long-term," or "You'll be here for years," can be interpreted as commitments. In many cases, these statements can unintentionally create expectations that conflict with the actual terms of employment or company policy. If those expectations are not met, they can lead to claims of misrepresentation or disputes over implied employment agreements. There is also a broader legal risk when promises are made inconsistently or tied, directly or indirectly, to personal characteristics. For example, if one candidate is reassured about long-term stability while another is not, it can create the appearance of unequal treatment. If those differences align with protected characteristics such as age, gender, or other factors, it may support a claim of discrimination. The safest and most professional approach is to avoid making any forward-looking assurances and instead keep all discussions focused on the role as it exists today, with clear communication that all employment terms are governed by the management company's policies and applicable law. Even casual, Icebreaker or conversational questions asked before, during, or after interviews can become evidence in discrimination claims if the candidate believes they were treated unfairly. Let's look at some examples of risky or illegal questions and the legal alternatives. Risky question: how old are you? The legal alternative: are you at least 18 years old? Risky question: what year did you graduate? The legal alternative: tell me about your education relevant to this position. Risky question: when do you plan to retire? The legal alternative: what are your long-term professional goals? Risky question: are you married? The legal alternative: this job requires occasional evenings. Are you able to work that schedule? Risky question: do you have children? The legal alternative: this role requires occasional weekend work. Are you able to meet that requirement? Risky question: who will take care of your children while you work? The legal alternative: this position requires regular attendance during these hours. Can you meet the attendance requirements? Risky question: are you planning to become pregnant? The legal alternative: this position requires travel twice per month. Are you able to travel? Risky question: what religion do you practice? The legal alternative: this role requires weekend shifts. Are you available to work those shifts? Risky question: what church do you attend? The legal alternative: are you able to work the schedule required for this role? Risky question: where were you born? The legal alternative: are you legally authorized to work in the United States? Risky question: what country are your parents from? The legal alternative: are you authorized to work in the US without sponsorship? Risky question: what is your first language? The legal alternative: this position requires strong written English communication. Can you meet that requirement? Risky question: do you have a disability? The legal alternative: are you able to perform the essential job functions with or without reasonable accommodation? The important thing to remember is questions should focus on job qualifications, not personal characteristics. Continuing with this theme, risky question: do you have any medical conditions? The legal alternative: this job requires lifting 25 pounds occasionally. Are you able to meet that requirement? Risky question: have you ever filed a workers' compensation claim? The legal alternative: can you safely perform the essential duties of the job? Risky question: have you ever been hospitalized? The legal alternative: are you able to meet the physical requirements of the position? Risky question: how much do you weigh? The legal alternative: this job requires lifting equipment weighing up to 40 pounds. Can you perform this task? Risky question: have you ever been arrested? The legal alternative: have you ever been convicted of a crime that relates to the duties of this job? Risky question: do you own a home? The legal alternative: this position requires reliable transportation. Are you able to meet that requirement? Risky question: what is your credit score? The legal alternative: only ask if job requires financial background check and disclose appropriately. Risky question: how tall are you? The legal alternative: are you able to perform the physical requirements of the job? Risky question: what is your sexual orientation? There is no legal equivalent. Never ask this. Risky question: what gender do you identify as? The legal alternative: there is no legal equivalent. Never ask this question. Risky question: what medications do you take? There is no legal equivalent. Never ask this question. A safe interview rule is if a question reveals personal characteristics rather than job qualifications, it probably should not be asked. Now we'll move our focus to after the candidate is hired and the foundational principle in community association operations, separation between governance and management. The board of directors is responsible for governance, setting policy, establishing direction, and making decisions in the best interest of the association. The management company, acting as the board's agent, is responsible for executing those decisions and overseeing the day-to-day operations, including supervision of on-site staff. This distinction is not just operational, it is fundamental to consistency, accountability, and risk reduction. When roles become blurred, it can lead to conflicting direction, employee confusion, inconsistent performance management, and potential legal exposure. To summarize the responsibilities of board and management, board members should establish policies, expectations, and service standards, approve staffing structures and major personnel decisions as applicable, Evaluate overall management company performance, not individual employees. Communicate priorities and concerns through the manager. Management is responsible for supervising and directing all on-site staff, assigning tasks and setting daily priorities, addressing performance issues and coaching employees, ensuring consistency in operations and communication. So what is the ideal process for addressing employee performance or job duties? Any substantive concern, feedback, or variance related to employee performance, conduct, or job responsibilities should follow a structured process. Step 1. Board members observe and document. If a board member identifies a concern, focus on objective observations. What was actually seen or experienced? Avoid assumptions or conclusions about the employee. Step 2. Communicate with the manager. Direct all concerns to the assigned community manager. Provide clear, factual information. Avoid directing or discussing the issue with the employee. For example, instead of saying to staff, "You need to handle this differently," say to the manager, "I observed this situation. Can you review and address as appropriate?" Step 3. Manager evaluation and action. The manager will assess the situation within the context of job expectations. Speak directly with the employee if needed. Provide coaching, clarification, or corrective action. Ensure consistency with company policies and employment laws. Step 4. Follow-up and reporting. The manager provides appropriate updates to the board. The board evaluates overall service levels, not individual discipline actions. Board members should avoid directly disciplining or correcting an employee, assigning tasks outside of the manager's direction, discussing performance concerns with staff, provide inconsistent or individual instructions, engaging in personal or informal feedback about job performance. A simple rule to remember: if it involves employee performance, direction, or correction, it goes through the manager. Understanding the separation between governance and management is not just about structure, it directly impacts legal risk. When board members step into employee supervision or performance discussions, even informally, it can create exposure to discrimination claims. Let's look at some real-world scenarios that illustrate how this risk develops. Our first example is inconsistent direction, perception of discrimination. A board member notices that a front desk employee is not greeting residents in the way they expect. The board member approaches the employee directly and says, "You need to be more upbeat and energetic when residents walk in." Meanwhile, the manager has not identified this as a performance issue and has not given similar feedback to other employees. What happens next? The employee feels singled out. The feedback is not documented or applied consistently. Other employees are not held to the same standard. Legal risk: if that employee happens to be over 40, they could claim the comment reflects age bias, energetic, implying younger preference. If they are part of another protected class, the inconsistency can be framed as unequal treatment. The issue isn't the feedback, it's who delivered it, how it was delivered, and the lack of consistency. Example 2. A casual comment leads to a disability discrimination claim. A maintenance employee appears to be working more slowly than usual. A board member says, "Are you okay? You don't seem like yourself lately." The employee shares that they are dealing with a medical issue. Later, the board expresses frustration about unrelated performance and pushes management to take action. What happens next? The board now has knowledge of a potential medical condition. Any adverse action, discipline, termination, reduced hours may appear to be connected. Legal risk? Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, this can be interpreted as disability discrimination or failure to accommodate, even if the board never intended that outcome. The risk was created by direct interaction and knowledge that should have been handled through management and their HR group. Example 3. Multiple supervisors leads to a claim of unequal treatment of a protected class. Different board members give different instructions to the same employee. One says focus on resident service. Another says focus on administrative tasks. A third criticizes the employee for not prioritizing correctly. What happens next? The employee cannot meet all expectations. Performance appears inconsistent. Discipline may follow. Legal risk. The employee may claim they were set up to fail and treated unfairly compared to others. If they are in a protected class, this can become a disparate treatment claim. The problem is not performance, it's lack of a single, consistent management structure. Our last example is post-complaint retaliation risk. An employee raises a concern to management about feeling uncomfortable with board interactions. Shortly after, a board member becomes less friendly, more critical, or pushes for replacement. Legal risk. This can be viewed as retaliation, which is prohibited under multiple employment laws, including Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Florida Civil Rights Act. Even subtle changes in behavior can be interpreted as retaliation if timing aligns. These are just a few real-world examples of how boards and associations can find themselves facing discrimination claims. In most cases, it is not the result of a deliberate or obvious violation of the law. Rather, risk is created through everyday actions such as direct board interaction with employees, inconsistent communication, lack of structure, documentation, or process, or knowledge of personal or protected information. The preventative rule is, board members should never directly address employee performance, discipline, or job duties. All such matters must be routed through the manager who can. Ensure consistency. Apply company policy. Involve HR where necessary. Protect both the association and the employee. What may feel like a simple comment or helpful guidance can quickly become the foundation of a legal claim when it bypasses the proper structure. Maintaining the boundary between governance and management is one of the most effective ways to prevent discrimination claims and ensure a fair, professional workplace. As board members, your role in the hiring and employee oversight process is both valuable and impactful, but it must be carried out within a clear and consistent framework. First, compliant hiring ensures that every decision is grounded in federal, state, and local employment laws, including those enforced by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This means focusing strictly on job-related qualifications, such as experience, skills, and the ability to perform the role, while avoiding questions or actions that could introduce bias or legal risk. Second, consistent practices are one of your strongest protections. When every candidate is evaluated using the same criteria and the same structured interview process, you create a level playing field and significantly reduce the likelihood of discrimination claims. Consistency is the guardrail that keeps decisions fair, objective, and defensible. Finally, clear oversight reinforces the proper relationship between the board and management. Addressing employee performance, job duties, or concerns through the manager, not directly with staff, ensures consistency, protects confidentiality, and allows for appropriate involvement of HR when needed. This structure not only reduces legal exposure but also supports a more professional and effective operation. When these three principles, compliant hiring, consistent practices, and clear oversight, work together, boards are able to support the hiring and employee oversight process while effectively performing their role. The result is better hiring decisions, stronger management relationships, and a well-governed community built on fairness, structure, and trust. Thanks for watching.